I really wanted to love Dragon Ball Daima, but I'm not so sure I did. Now from the outset, let me make one thing crystal clear. My feelings on Dragon Ball Daima are not going to be purely positive or negative. They're complicated. At its best, Dragon Ball Daima delivers a stunningly premium experience filled with moments so genuinely captivating and authentic, they manage to evoke an excitement I hadn't felt since childhood. An excitement Dragon Ball Super never even came close to eliciting from me. Yet, at its worst, that very premium facade began to fracture and eventually crumble, exposing, in my view, a narrative far more troubled and messy than what Daima's generous production schedule could possibly ever excuse. Though still, despite these flaws, when the final credits rolled, I couldn't help but shed a tear. Not just for what we had received, but also for a profound echo left behind. A potential left perhaps forever unfulfilled. I'm totally not Mark, and today I want to unpack my complicated feelings about this magical, tragic, and at times frustrating final creative echo from the author that defined my formative years, the late and forever great Akira Toriyama, and his final parting gift to us all, Dragon Ball Daima. When Dragon Ball Daima's first trailer dropped, you could almost hear the sound of every fan's heart dropping in unison. Okay, that might be a smidge hyperbolic, but given the creative choice to age down the cast and set the series immediately following the Buu saga, it was inevitably going to draw immediate comparisons to Dragon Ball GT. Now I know Dragon Ball GT has its fans, but I'm proudly not one of them. Sure, it has its moments, but overall it's plagued by fundamental storytelling problems, many of which I've detailed previously. You can check that out for yourselves. But among its most criticized choices was the decision to turn Goku, everyone's favorite plucky butt kicker, back into a child. Again, despite my own criticism, I can understand why GT took that route. You see, a major issue plaguing modern Dragon Ball is something called power creep, where the main characters have become so excessively powerful that introducing increasingly stronger villains can feel cartoonishly forced and contrived. I mean, we've literally gone from a strong kid in the forest struggling against regular humans to that same character taking on literal gods in space. Power creep's a hell of a drug. However, jokes aside, this aspect of Dragon Ball is precisely why finding a solution to power creep often feels contrived or like a significant step backwards in terms of narrative progression. Unlike most other shonen stories that offer battles as a means of dispensing the narrative, Dragon Ball goes one step further. At its core, Dragon Ball is specifically about the physical progression and the pushing past one's own limits. Thus, reverting characters to a previous checkpoint in their physical journeys, i.e. turning them back into kids, feels counterintuitive. It's like picking up Frodo from Mount Doom at the end of the third film and dropping him back at the Shire just to extend the story's runtime beyond what feels natural. This was a major issue I had early on with Dragon Ball GT. Its regressive transformation felt superficial as well as antithetical to Dragon Ball's fundamental story. While it impacted Goku's abilities, everyone else remained unaffected, making any dynamic change feel relatively shallow and forced. Furthermore, the primary goal of GT was to gather the Black Star Dragon Balls again to prevent the Earth's destruction, not to reacquire that lost progress. Essentially, this creative choice from GT existed primarily as a nostalgic visual hook rather than a genuinely compelling narrative tool to inform the story in any meaningful capacity. And so it's no wonder the majority reaction to Daima's trailer echoed those very concerns. However, Daima has one thing Dragon Ball GT didn't: Akira Toriyama at the writing helm. And honestly, his approach, while understated, was inspired.
What the heck? You guys both turned small! What do you mean we turned small?
Unlike GT, where turning Goku into a child felt like a nostalgic and largely surface-level change, Daima deeply integrates the concept into the totality of its narrative's fabric. It's not just a comedic gimmick, it reshapes character dynamics and their interactions with the world. There's genuine charm and thoughtfulness in seeing characters adjust to their newfound youth. Yes, it's funny seeing Roshi without his glasses looking like a chubby Saitama, but beneath the humor lies an earnest exploration of how those younger bodies affect previously mastered skills. Watching Goku struggle to control his flight or misjudge his combat range due to his shorter limbs introduce real stakes and narrative complexity, helping the story return to an older style of Dragon Ball, emphasizing teamwork and diverse skill sets. Nothing is really lost through doing so, there's no regression. It's simply a new challenge for Goku and everyone else around him to overcome. Bulma is a prime example and beneficiary of this very creative choice. Unencumbered by her physical regression, she retains importance through her technological expertise, all the while Goku can no longer rely on instant transmission to solve every issue. Super Saiyan? Can't do it. Kaioken? Can't do it. Flying? Can't do it. And you would think that this would feel like a regression, but instead it just feels like a test of who Goku is. Is he going to let this setback define him, or is he going to knuckle down and get all of those powers back because he's just that damn good? And the best part is, this makes everyone else around him feel that much more valuable, while deepening the group's interactions and necessity for each other. Moreover, Daima impressed me with its thoughtful use of nostalgia. Instead of those opening episodes relying on superficial callbacks, they selectively brought back iconic elements of Dragon Ball's past in ways that genuinely enhanced the story. A standout example is the return of Goku's Nyoibo, the Power Pole. Its reintroduction isn't mere fan service, it's directly tied to Goku's current physical limitations. It's a solve to a problem. With his smaller body struggling to reach opponents effectively, retrieving the Nyoibo feels thoughtfully added and narratively justified, most importantly. Equally impressive is Toriyama's restraint in scenarios where nostalgia could have easily overshadowed storytelling integrity. Following the retrieval of the Nyoibo, many viewers may have seen the return of Kintoon as a foregone conclusion. In for a penny, in for a pound, am I right? Wrong. This is the difference between thoughtful and cheap fan service. Goku's journey in Dragon Ball Daima is defined by his struggle to reacquire what has been taken from him, and through doing so become a better martial artist. Which is why within episode 2, Goku spends so much time regaining his lost fluency in flight. Bring Kintoon into the equation and immediately its presence runs antithetical to Daima's story, undermining and undercutting Goku's personal growth.
I want you to turn the ones who defeated Majin Buu and all their friends back into children!
Creating villains is hard. Actually, okay, wait, let me clarify. Creating good villains is hard. This is especially true in long-running series like Dragon Ball, where seemingly every extreme idea has already been explored. The sinister reincarnation of God's evil twin? You betcha! Your secret evil brother shows up with a crew of even worse villains. Check. Space Hitler. Double check. But beyond raw power, what truly makes a Dragon Ball villain compelling is how their personality shapes the conflict of their arc. Frieza's playful ruthlessness made the cat-and-mouse games of Namek incredibly captivating and tense. Cell's cocky competitive streak mirrored Goku's, making him the perfect adversary for Gohan to overcome as he stepped into his father's shoes. Basically, if you craft a villain with genuine ambition and a unique personality, the story almost writes itself. However, when you create a villain carelessly, you end up with something like, I don't know, wouldn't it be cool if Gohan fought Cell again, but now he's giant and red, resulting in a Dragon Ball film with the most annoying title imaginable. Modern Dragon Ball has certainly been a mixed bag in this respect, but for every Cell, Max, or Jiren of the world, Toriyama has also delivered genuinely fascinating characters like Beerus, Zamasu, and Broly. Each of these villains and antagonists come with their own distinct stories and personalities, directly influencing the narrative and engaging the audience on a deeper level. And so, when little stumpy King Goma waddled onto the stage, part of me felt apprehensive, yes, but mostly I was excited. Playing it safe leads to boring television, and Akira Toriyama is anything but boring, oftentimes introducing villains in pairs or groups, cleverly using their contrasting personalities to highlight individual characteristics and establish their roles within the story. Take Vegeta and Nappa for example. Nappa's loud, reckless aggression and emotional impulsivities highlight Vegeta's calculated ruthlessness, strategic mindset, and attention to detail. In Dragon Ball Daima, Goma and Degasu embody a similar dynamic. Right from his introduction, Goma showcases classic Toriyama humor, fitting perfectly into the celebratory tone of Dragon Ball's 40th anniversary that Daima represents. He's an exaggerated villain whose intimidation factor is constantly undermined by his quirky and eccentric demeanor. Now, I know plenty of viewers groaned at the reveal of this goofy little manlet as our supposed big bad, but personally, I saw immense potential here. A villain who is immature, easily manipulated, and has spent his entire life as the perpetual butt of a joke could lead to some truly intriguing storytelling. Handing a character like this the title of King opens up numerous fascinating possibilities. So, by the time the first 2 episodes concluded, marking the close of Act 1 with Gloria whisking Goku and Shin away into the demon realm, I believed we were set for a villainous performance unlike anything Dragon Ball had offered before. Much like Goku's own journey in Daima, this could blend thoughtful nostalgia with innovative, genuinely fresh storytelling. A character never previously taken seriously had now ascended to the highest rank imaginable, leveraging his newfound power to reduce the strongest fighters in the universe into feeling just as small and powerless as he once did. That would have been a really cool idea, but honestly, I was ready for anything as long as it was good. Wait, what's that? Alrighty, so far, so good, right? We've received a compelling reintroduction to our beloved cast, clearly established our villain, the inciting incidents which was cleverly executed upon, and Glorio's timely arrival has effectively called Goku and Shin into action while the rest of the gang work on repairing their consistently faltering ship. The setup itself delivers plenty of intriguing new lore, though admittedly some contradictions pop up here and there. But let's be honest, what's a new Dragon Ball series without a few retcons, am I right? Also, and this is a bit of an aside, but it is hilarious, Goma's wish itself has a particular and amusing implication. By specifically requesting Shenlong to transform Goku and all of his friends or allies into children, we end up seeing characters like Master Roshi reverting into childhood forms despite having virtually no direct role in the battle against Majin Buu. So, if that's the case, why was Korin in his normal form when Goku visited Korin Tower back in that second episode? Shouldn't he be like, I don't know, a kitten? There's only one logical explanation to draw from this. Korin isn't Goku's friend, and frankly, that's funny. But okay, enough introductory foreplay. Prior to Dragon Ball Daima, our collective knowledge of the demon realm amounted to little more than scattered bits of lore and the formidable Dabura himself, right? So Toriyama certainly had his work cut out for him in realizing this. And guess what? He nailed it.
I meant to say a Popeye goldfish.
That is still a goldfish!
This is where the adventure begins proper, Act 2 gets into full swing, and we dive into a portion of the story I affectionately refer to as the prelude to Episode 8, the greatest episode of all time. I might be slightly over-exaggerating, but that is easily my favorite episode of his entire story, and when we get to that, I will, in excruciating detail, explain why. But first, we've got ships to lose, crash, breakdown, and steal, and oh my god, the demon world to explore. Warpfish as a narrative device encapsulates all of the quirky charm we've come to expect from Akira Toriyama. Visually distinct and narratively functional, Warpfish's warp mechanic vividly illustrates the societal structure within the demon realm itself. It's a nice bit of environmental storytelling. The three locked pathways depicted through red, blue, and yellow circles effectively underscore the stark socioeconomic divisions between the realms. The narrative clearly leverages this mechanic by forcing our heroes, and by extension us, to start from Demon World 3, the farthest possible point from our intended destination. And so even on the doorstep of this realm, Goma's tyranny and control can be felt in negative ways, and it's a wonderful touch. But this is all set dressing, right? What about the dialogue? Well, it's surprisingly subtle actually, particularly concerning the most mysterious character, Glorio. Many of us, myself included, hate it when stuff is spelled out for us in a show. And so when Glorio's familiarity with local customs and sensibilities is used to communicate that he is in fact from that neck of the woods, my face lit up. Skillfully, it fulfills two narrative functions: enhancing Glorio's depth as someone deeply entrenched in the poorest demon world society quite elegantly, while also simultaneously bringing into focus Shin's true role in the party. Now, while I initially anticipated Shin to take a more active part in the action of the series, 90% of the reason he's actually there for is to be the brain Goku doesn't have between his ears. It's not a vapid role by any stretch and does serve to add tension to the early parts of the series through his subtle investigation of Glorio. However, even upon second viewing, I was still a little let down by how little he ended up contributing to the overall story and its action. So, the world building is solid and the dialogue is thoughtful while managing to feel authentic to Dragon Ball itself. The only thing left to examine then, therefore, is the secret ingredient to any Dragon Ball project: the fighting.
He said, say it again!
The Tavern fight in Episode 3 is the first substantial original action set piece of the series, and I love it in ways that made me exceptionally excited for what was to come. Since Akira Toriyama and Toei themselves picked back up the Dragon Ball series with Battle of Gods and subsequently Dragon Ball Super, while there have been some stellar action moments that I have had great praise for in the past, I've often also felt that something was fundamentally missing, and now I think I know what that is. This is a fight informed entirely by character on every single level, brimming with personality and authenticity. While these thugs are too weak to create any real tension for us at home, Shin is the only one around who has any idea of what's really about to take place here. And the best part is, all of this action is rather unbefitting of a larger grown-up character like adult Goku. Therefore, the action here is tailor-made for his smaller body. The original Dragon Ball series we all grew up with wasn't conceived of by the animators or writers at Toei Animation. It all came from the mind of Akira Toriyama, his manga, and most importantly, his choreography, layouts, and direction. And you can feel that lack of source material everywhere within Dragon Ball Super and GT, in my opinion. Backflips, back handsprings, bowl fighting, all delivered with an unassuming face that has one goal: to not allow this minor inconvenience impede his ability to consume as many alien burgers as he possibly can. It is awesome, hilarious, and it's oh so Dragon Ball to its very core. There are no flurry of blasts or quote-unquote stereotypical Dragon Ball choreography here. This is a fight that only Goku would have, and one that only could have happened in this specific setting. It is perfect. Somewhat even reminiscent of early Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan films like Drunken Master. However, it's in the climax to episode 4 that, for me, presented both the darkest narrative moment in the series so far, and maybe the most significant missed opportunity too. You see, vividly showcasing Goma's cruel regime through the military police forcibly draining life from impoverished villagers as a form of twisted debt repayment, it's brutal. And what's more is, the actual technology here can have clear thematic connections to Goku's reduced age and lifespan vulnerabilities. It feels intentionally designed to introduce threats uniquely suited to challenge a Saiyan child like Goku. But guess what? We never see these machines again. I was devastated. I even made a video predicting its future implication because I was so sure it was actually going to come up again. But my own bitter disappointment aside, this tragic state of affairs also sets the stage for an unlikely hero. And no, it's not Goku. The one who steps up before anyone else is a little demon girl named Pansy. Now, I'm not gonna lie. On the lead up to Dragon Ball Daima's release, with all of the GT comparisons and this little girl character front and center on many of the promotional materials, I started to worry. But thankfully, I was worried for nothing because her characterization is awesome. She's so likable. Placing her courage and integrity front and center like this while also cleverly highlighting her greatest strengths like intellect, innovation, and technological expertise, it immediately bonded me to the character. Unlike Dragon Ball GT's Pan, known best for being a massive disappointment and in the goddamn way all the time, stop getting kidnapped! Pansy immediately emerges as proactive, selfless, courageous, in an endearing way, and highly capable. Which means, in addition to her being capable of fixing their ship, which crashes more times than Goku's hair changes color in this series, Pansy's connections within Demon World 3 become instrumental to forward progression. Her familial connection to King Kadan directly intersects with Glorio's previous claims about his mission's origin, providing further fuel to Shin's already burning suspicions. However, while all of these elements individually seem to hit the mark for me, something consistently felt missing. Something I couldn't quite pinpoint until the first major fight of the series.
I want you to let out some of the power you're holding back! Push Glorio to his limit!
The confrontation between Goku and Glorio in episode 6 is significant, superbly animated, and yet it left me deeply unfulfilled and underwhelmed.
That's what she said.
So much so that by the time it ended, I was actually dreading what was to come in the future for the series. Visually, the fight undeniably shines as a dynamic exhibition of Glorio's magical abilities and Goku's requisition and mastery of Super Saiyan 1 to bring about the fight's end. It's beautifully animated and genuinely impressive to watch. However, visual splendor aside, from a directorial level, as soon as Goku kicked off the fight with one arm behind his back, something crucial and necessary became distractingly apparent. Now, over a quarter of the way through the series, we have still yet to receive any form of tension, forcing me to question, what is this fight's purpose beyond demonstrating that even as a child, Goku can thoroughly style on and dominate Glorio with ease? What greater narrative purpose does it serve? To give Glorio a sense of how strong Goku is? I mean, okay, what does that do if his plan never involved direct confrontation with him anyway? Feeling this, I started to look back on the progression of this story only to be struck by a profound sense of something lacking. We witness a bar fight, encounter a king, and after this fight even reach a brand new village. All of this is perfectly fine, but it's missing something fundamental. There's no micro-level storytelling to help this world feel genuinely alive and inhabited. Consider how, in the original Dragon Ball, characters like Snow and her village are intricately tied to Muscle Tower's greater narrative, or how Appa and his father were intrinsically tied to the events of Tao Pai Pai and the Sacred Lookout. Pansy is the closest Daima gets to this narrative interconnectedness with her life-draining necklace subplot. Yet when all is said and done, it still feels underdeveloped, with not a single person at the castle genuinely caring. They pause briefly for a cheerful little fight, but quickly moving on never to address the issue again, leaving us at home with villagers we don't really know, or feel much about, or care about. Within this early section of the story, characters dotted all across every scene, from the innkeeper to the tavern patrons, all the way to the randos they meet on foot. Everyone is seen wearing these strange neck braces. We never understand why until we see Pansy's introduction. It's a brilliant scene and offers a lot of texture to the world itself. However, once Shin removes Pansy and Hibis's necklaces, the thread, as I said, is entirely dropped. Not a single character on the enemy team even tries to leverage these collars, even when King Kadan comes in at the very end. It all feels totally void of meaning and narrative consequence. And that's not even to mention the fact that we are now 7 episodes deep into a 20-episode series, and Goku has yet to encounter a single antagonistic threat. To this story's credit though, the strategic narrative decision to initially restrict Goku's ability to transform fully into Super Saiyan is commendable, as it preserves long-term tension and unpredictability. Though, if Goku is orders of magnitude stronger than everyone he encounters in the demon world anyway, and his reacquisition of the transformation comes about unceremoniously without any real struggle, I have to ask, why bother nerfing him at all beyond offering a plausible reason for him not to boss rush the big bad? And if that's the only reason, that kinda sucks. It seems functional, but not at all compelling. Needless to say, at this point, I was begging for something substantial. Goku needed a challenge. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce the next segment entitled Totally Not Mark attempts to explain why episode 8 of Dragon Ball Daima is the best episode of the series and it's not even close, while also gushing uncontrollably and at times disturbingly about how staggeringly good Tamagami 3 versus Goku ended up being and how it might actually be one of the best fights in the entire franchise despite his worrying and reservations leading into this episode because 3 elements of emotional genius and went so damn hard despite that he ended up watching it 78 times in preparation for this section. This fight is the most Dragon Ball thing I've ever watched. It's everything I wanted from Dragon Ball Daima and then some. Now months removed from my initial viewing, I sincerely think that minute for minute, it's arguably among the very best fights in the franchise from a choreographic perspective. Here's why. From the moment the gang touched down at the village neighboring the Tamagami at the end of episode 7, the tone and atmosphere of the series shifted dramatically. Everything suddenly felt a lot more serious, with the environment surrounding the stage telling a story into and of itself. The scars of past efforts and failures to secure this prize were etched into the landscape. The only structure left standing amidst this ruin, the Tamagami of World 3. The Tamagamis effectively serve as Toriyama's answer to the notorious Act 2 problem, where many stories struggle to maintain momentum after an engaging beginning yet before the climax fully forms. With the first act concluding at the close of episode 2 and the climax nowhere near close to beginning, Act 2 here serves as a building block or stepping stone process towards the finale. Ideally, it will provide targeted and bespoke consequences and challenges for the central characters unique to their journeys, with the secondary effect of addressing any pacing issues. In video game terms, these guys are the mini-bosses guarding keys that unlock the final boss's room. It's a reliable narrative strategy, and from the moment these characters were introduced in episode 1, I've been completely enamored by their design, lore, purpose, and specifically impressed by Toriyama's method of introducing them. If you cast your minds back to episode 1, Goma and Degusu express palpable distress and fear over the power demonstrated by Earth's fighters against Majin Buu. It's this fear that acts as the impetus for the entire series. However, in order to obtain Dragon Balls and make the wish they needed, Goma chose to go directly to the Earthling's doorstep that he feared, rather than make any attempt to pry these demon balls from his doorstep on these stoic guardians. That choice tells us everything we needed to know about them. These monoliths are staggeringly powerful, far beyond the scope and reach of the demon realm's highest authority. And that's an interesting detail because what I particularly appreciate about the prelude to this battle is that it captures something that's been lacking in most Dragon Ball material since Goku's transition into adulthood. An atmosphere that's captured perfectly in this exchange between Pansy and Goku when she says, "Are you really sure you want to do this thing? I heard even King Dabura couldn't beat the Tamagami." This is a reaction emblematic of all those Goku and co are met with when he announces his ambition to defeat Tamagami 3. You see, for 20 years, no one has even so much as tried in this world, which tells us a lot about not just the Tamagami's strength, but the culture of the oppressed world itself. There's a culture in Demon World 3 that's unlike the other two. They're far from wealthy, largely simple people who've endured considerable oppression for untold generations. For thousands of years, they have existed under the boots of tyrants, fostering a pervasive culture of deceit, misery, with little hope for change or a brighter tomorrow evident in every interaction we see. And yet, when faced with this bewildered question from Pansy, all Goku can say is,
When I hear that, I only want to do it more.
This moment is when it clicked for me. Goku's journey as a child in this story isn't primarily to be challenged by his own limitations or to retrieve his lost powers. While those do serve functional roles within the narrative, the core purpose of Goku here is to liberate this world from tyranny simply by being himself, the embodiment of passion, ambition, and endless optimism. Now, as a longtime viewer, I felt a wave of nostalgia wash over me. Suddenly, I was a kid again, watching a young Goku enter a troubled town and attempt to achieve the impossible. However, what makes this episode so impressive, to me at least, is what we don't see. Employing nostalgia like this isn't a surefire path to success. In fact, it's a complicated balancing act. A tightrope walk with one misstep and the illusion shatters, bringing the entire scene crashing down. The way the animators and storyboard artists intentionally emphasize Tamagami 3's hulking figure and Goku's tiny stature to not only frame certain shots, but also inform the flow of combat, it is as mesmerizingly beautiful as it is thrilling to watch. And what's more is, this fight couldn't exist in this form had Goku been an adult. Sure, you could scale up the Tamagami, but that comes with a very different feel and dynamic, as we've seen from the many other large-scale battles in the series. From the word go, Tamagami 3 kicks off the fight with imposing and thunderous hammer attacks that establish him as the bigger but slightly slower fighter, while Goku focuses on speed and agility, using the very rock fragments around him that are being kicked up into the air through these heavy blows to position himself for a quick counterattack using his Nyoibo. But it didn't work. And seeing this, Goku uses the pole once again, this time to test his opponent's speed, barely managing to dodge a counterattack hammer throw in the process. The entire opening sequence, while inventively choreographed, is specifically structured such that Goku is observing and downloading everything Tamagami 3 can do. You'll notice that he never really tries the same attack twice, and if he does do it on those rare occasions, it's only to bait in the attack he anticipates in order to create an opening for a brand new one. Plus, every failed attempt by Goku is met with an immediate response from him. He can't reach the Tamagami 3's head? No problem. He'll just bring the head down to the ground instead by taking out his legs. Beat for beat, this is less a battle and more a chess match. With each attempt, Goku picks apart Tamagami 3's formidable defenses piece by piece until he's got all the info he needs. It's easy to overlook, but this Goku, despite physically being a child, shouldn't behave childishly. Of course, even as an adult, Goku often remains blunt or oblivious to social norms, but that's distinctly different from his early Dragon Ball portrayal, where his youthful naivety defined him. Unfortunately, on occasion, Daima struggles with maintaining that crucial distinction. Unlike other beloved characters whose journeys revolve around conquering their inner demons, Goku's personal growth throughout the entire series has been, well, a lot more subtle and externalized. While there have indeed been moments of emotional growth from him, Goku's story never fundamentally hinged on his emotional maturity in the same way Vegeta's and Piccolo's arcs did. His story just simply never was about this. Toriyama knows that, but he's not the sole creative force behind Daima either, leading to frustrating fluctuations in Goku's maturity that eventually become difficult to ignore if you're as familiar with the character and series as I am. At times, he's the innocent but seasoned Buu Saga version of himself that we all expect him to be, while in others, he's suddenly behaving as though he's just set out to train with Roshi for the first time. And I can kind of understand why some writers might want to push in this direction. This is a 40th anniversary celebration of the series after all, and within it there's a desire to showcase all the versions of Goku we've come to know over the decades. But just like I outlined in episode 1, there's a fine line between tasteful and thoughtless nostalgia. Thankfully though, in this episode, Goku feels like an adult in every way but physical. We're not looking at a fledgling prodigy innocently navigating a tense encounter, but a seasoned genius of martial arts combat feeling out his opponent. While Goku might struggle with words sometimes, there's a sophistication to his movement and choice in combat that often goes unaddressed because, again, he lets his actions speak for themselves.
Wait, what's that little goober doing?
It's here that what Goku's been doing this entire time comes into focus, and it's also when I think Tamagami 3 realizes the scope of the fighter he stands across from, and perhaps even more than that, the caliber of the person who's challenging him today. Later in the episode, it's revealed that Tamagami 3 had always possessed the ability to instantly repair the weapon Goku had just destroyed, thus making his choice to face Goku unarmed all the more powerful retroactively. Much like Goku had been throughout this fight, Tamagami 3 had been making his own observations, waiting to see if Goku was the sort of desperate challenger that would exploit a weakness like this or not. But of course, for Goku, there was only ever going to be one answer to that question. Upon rewatches of this fight, you'll also notice that despite Goku being the challenger, whenever there's a break in combat, Tamagami 3 is always the one to attack first, and Goku always on the counterattack. This, again, is by design, and because Goku, as is the case in most of his fights across the series, desires every challenge he engages in to be as fair as possible. Thus, through allowing his opponent to dictate the rules of engagement, he, Goku, can use the exact right amount of strength to make the fight as interesting as possible. This is why, once he transforms into Super Saiyan 1, and Tamagami 3 reveals suddenly that he can shoot Ki Blast too, Goku, almost frustrated, exclaims, "Oh, come on, you can do that!" It's said not out of fear, but almost as a sense of betrayal. He had thought the rules of engagement had already been established, which is why, despite starting off this second phase in Super Saiyan far more aggressively, as soon as this ability was revealed, the space between him and Tamagami 3 widens once again. Heck, even as he gears up for what is the final attack of this battle, his words betray his motive.
Well, that's how we're gonna play it!
The utilization of the Kamehameha here is a perfect distillation of what makes all of Dragon Ball Daima's greatest successes so spectacular. Its restraint and respect for the story. Due to the frequency of the Kamehameha's use across the franchise, it's easy to forget just how incredible of a technique it truly is. We're talking about a move Master Roshi himself spent decades upon decades honing and mastering. But outside of a few key moments here and there in the series, the Kamehameha has seldom lived up to the iconic reputation it acquired across the last few decades. However, this is where Goku and Dragon Ball Daima change all of that by showing Tamagami 3 the real monster he's been up against this entire time. Looking back across the series, the Kamehameha has been used as a reliable ace in the hole for Goku, most notably when he's backed into a corner and only he stands between the Earth and certain destruction. Just look at the beam struggle between Goku and Vegeta during the Saiyan saga. The framing of Goku looking up to Vegeta during that exchange is intentional, framing Goku as the underdog, the last line of defense, but look at how it's framed in Daima. This is the very first time Goku, as a child, uses the Kamehameha. 8 episodes in, for once it is used, oh my sweet God in heaven, it is presented like a heart-melting death laser that it was always meant to be, shredding through rock, upending the earth surrounding Goku just by charging it. And once it's unleashed, oh my God, once it's unleashed, the scope of the damage it leaves in its wake, it's unlike anything you've seen before. It's almost Godzilla's atomic breath. And the staggering part of it all is, even though Tamagami 3 somehow found a way out of this impossible to escape scenario, Goku, just like he has throughout this entire fight, is always 3 steps ahead. More than its beauty, more than its thrill factor, this fight shows Son Goku for what he truly is. The martial arts genius of Battle Shonen. Looking back on this fight and subsequent cup game, now armed with the knowledge of its outcome, the real story of this fight becomes unavoidably apparent. It was never about whether or not Goku could defeat this enemy, but rather if Goku could save this town, and by extension, the world they live in. And I think, out of everything that takes place in this episode, no other moment so wonderfully synthesizes the essence of Goku into a few short seconds more perfectly than the final phase of this Dragon Ball challenge, the cup game. As seen not just within Daima but across the entire franchise, Goku has never been the sort of person to concern himself with the opinion, support of, or adulation of others. And I think that's perfect. You see, a great battle shonen tells its story through combat and action. It's the language of the genre. But what makes Goku such a fantastic and, in my opinion, timeless battle shonen protagonist specifically is that on top of resolving conflict with combat, he manages to expose elements of his opponents and onlookers' personalities even they may not have been aware of in the first place through his actions, moving them from a position of unhealthy conformity and nihilism into necessary change. Meaning, quite literally, Goku is the embodiment and personification of the battle shonen genre itself. What begins as a sprinkling of a few disillusioned spectators, through the actions of Goku, something starts to change. What? The fight isn't over yet? This isn't how it's supposed to be. The Tamagami is invincible. And as more people are drawn into this increasingly hard to ignore battle, thanks to a single child, a story is playing out on the faces of every single individual onlooker. What began as a gathering for a funeral has transformed itself into a generation-defining celebration of hope. Now, with the undivided attention of the entire town, all that remains for Goku to do is to select the cup under which the prize is said to rest. Under what cup is the Dragon Ball hiding, he asks. The location of the Dragon Ball, which held the salvation of this world in its power, wasn't where any of the locals, Glorio, Pansy, or even Shin were looking. Symbolic of their greatest issue, they were all figuratively and literally looking in the wrong place. In the end, it took Goku, the personification of ambition, hope, and enthusiasm, to point out that the answer they were all looking for was hiding in plain sight the entire time. What an incredibly fitting end to this astounding challenge and fight. Forevermore, this Tamagami that once stood on the outskirts of this beaten down town as a monument to their own powerlessness can now act as a lasting reminder that no matter how far hope and salvation might feel, it's never truly out of reach as long as there are those out there who dare to believe that they can win. It's a sentiment so beautiful, a smile managed to invade the once stone-cold expression of even Glorio. Phew, okay, that was a lot for what is effectively one half of an episode, and yeah, that's right, I said one half. The other deals with Dr. Arinsu, specifically her role in the story and what her plan ultimately is. A third party unaligned with either Goku or Goma's respective parties, one who has insider knowledge from Goma's camp and has an actual mole within Goku's. I was beyond jazzed by this idea for several reasons. The opening visual of Dragon Ball Daima features a clip show of the Buu saga suggesting both placement on the timeline as well as a motivation for the villains of the story. For Goma and Degasu, that motivation is a fear of Goku and Co somehow managing to make their way into the demon realm to stop them. But for Dr. Arinsu, the chaos of the Buu saga offered a compelling opportunity she was unable to ignore. And that's when we see it.
Hold on. Back up! What in the world would Arinsu have been doing in the middle of this?
This is a fantastic way of interconnecting two arcs, created decades apart, that feels authentic and believable. One of the shortcomings Super uniquely suffers from against the other Dragon Ball series is a lack of connective tissue between arcs. In Dragon Ball Z, each major arc, Saiyan, Frieza, Android, Cell, flowed directly from the consequences of the last. Heck, the Cell and Android material, you could also argue, was informed by the Red Ribbon Army too. But this is all to say that such an approach created an undeniable sense of progression and cohesion within the greater story. Dragon Ball Super attempted to do this in Battle of Gods, but in truth, the way they tried to imply that Beerus had always been there felt clunky at best. But this? It's so simple. This scene where Arinsu appears at the site of Vegeta's sacrifice feels perfectly integrated for two reasons. Firstly, unlike Beerus, who is explained to have had a hand in some of the most iconic and groundbreaking moments of the series, Arinsu simply sneaks in during a period of time and location where the focus wasn't on her or the story really. That is believable. Secondly, and this is the most important part, Dragon Ball Daima didn't shoehorn this Buu Saga Arinsu connection at the beginning of the series. Instead, her involvement is part of the mystery that reveals itself as the story unfolds. When Goma comes to Earth, he's told that others have passed through before him. The party of Deborah and Babidi are one of them, and the other, a mystery traveler. It's such a fun way to introduce retroactive continuity in my opinion. It just works. The final result is an incredibly well executed upon connection between Buu and Daima through this character, while simultaneously introducing a potent new threat that could radically alter the balance of power itself. It's a three-way cat and mouse game just like Namek. Suddenly, Daima is feeling dangerous, right as we head towards the mysterious and undoubtedly perilous second demon world. That's what I thought. But Daima unfortunately had other plans. Something you might have picked up on throughout the first half of this review is that while Dragon Ball Daima consistently offers compelling threads, intriguing concepts, and some of the most authentic dialogue written since the original manga, it's never more than 1 or 2 seconds away from some structural hiccup or execution flaw keeping it from achieving the greatness it so obviously is capable of. The introduction of a third faction vying for the Dragon Balls is genuinely exciting, but as we climb aboard the 5th or, 6th ship we've commandeered, I've honestly lost count at this point, we move to venture into the second demon world and are immediately met with several prominent issues I have to address.
Hold on. We're using a gendarmerie plane in Pin. We could go to the first demon world.
But we'd be skipping over one of the Dragon Balls if we did that.
What the actual fuck? The issue here isn't that Goku has two priorities. That's actually a good thing. Like I said, him wanting the Dragon Balls gives us something to actually do in Act 2 that works towards a conclusion and suits the story of Dragon Ball. The issue is that the writers have given him the opportunity to choose between them. And Goku chooses the Dragon Balls over Dende. Now, from a story perspective, I can understand the decision. You don't want Goku to boss rush the big bad without all the other characters in place, and you want to show off the extensive worlds you've created. That's totally fine. But then don't give him the fucking choice then. What's the point in keeping each of these areas behind lock and key if you're going to randomly open the option up to Goku halfway through only for him to say, no thanks? Giving them that choice only hurts the story and is entirely avoidable.
Although, I am still worried about Dende.
Then go to Dende, you morons! Listen, Shin, Nahare, or whatever your name is. Goku can only understand fighting. Pansy's an 82-year-old child, and Glorio's a bad guy right now. You're supposed to be the voice of reason.
If they chose to take Dende alive, then they must need him for whatever they're planning.
Great, so we're cool with him just being trafficked casually right now. So while this is happening, I have to ask, is there a reason you need to acquire these Dragon Balls in order? Couldn't you just, I don't know, go to Demon World 2 last? Now, it's worth noting that forcing a decision like this upon a main character can offer fantastic thematic and narrative implications under more favorable circumstances. Luffy, when offered the chance to learn the secrets of the world from Rayleigh, insisted on not hearing them because that would ruin the adventure for him and by extension us. But unlike Goku and co, Luffy's decision to extend the adventure doesn't put another life in direct danger. Goku and Shin don't know that Goma is about as formidable as a fart in a hurricane, but they do know that Goku is stronger than pretty much everyone there following the defeat of Tamagami 3. Even if you think Dende is likely to be okay at Goma's, why even take the risk going to Demon World and they're gone. Furthermore, the pacing within this episode is atrocious. Goon attacks, Kraken attacks, ships destroyed again. Go to wait on the original Namek. Oh wait, Vegeta and the gang are finally here. Gotta go get them and do the same Kraken bullshit thing as before, and then finally they regroup. Now I ask, why not skip the stupid portal stuff and just have everyone hop into a normal ship together and go to the second Demon World without morally dubious questions being asked? That literally achieves everything this sequence did of worth, which admittedly wasn't much, and saves 20 minutes of your time. Heck, put the Tamagami fight on the planet Namek and boom, there's your intro to Neva too. All of that would take literally 2 minutes and would grant Vegeta's fight with Tamagami 2 more time, or perhaps we could make the radical choice of finding a way to somehow make Goma interesting. No? Okay, then let's move on. Now, due to the long-running nature of every other Dragon Ball animated adaptation, because there's no hard limit on the number of episodes an arc can have, time and pacing were never really concerns in the same way they are now. Looking at you, Goku versus Frieza. You see, as it stands, now having passed the halfway point, there's zero tension. Goma has had virtually zero development, meaningful agency, or screen time of note since the first episode, and we have only a few more left before we need to cash in our chips for the climax. At this point, I'm wondering, what exactly are we paying off? Can Goku defeat a weird short clown guy? Tune in next time! Whatever, at least the episode is over. Oh wait, no it's not!
Nah, I'd be okay with skipping it.
Don't mind him. Please go ahead.
Good, then it's settled. Enough talking, people. We have work to do.
For almost 4 straight minutes of the episode's conclusion, Mr. Shin Nahare himself feels compelled to grind what little momentum this episode had, who am I kidding, it didn't have any tension, to a screeching halt in order to exposit some admittedly interesting lore about the history of the Kais. There's just one problem. This doesn't impact the story even remotely. Now, I find this information and history of the Dragon Ball world as interesting as the next hardcore Dragon Ball fan does. Seeing that Kami's ship shares the same design as those used by the Glins was a really nice touch. Plus, learning that Shin is an onion man is funny as hell. But when we are already so crunched for time and interest is already starting to wane so heavily, why are we stopping the forward progression yet again of everything in the name of popping a squat and sitting in on Shin's storytelling corner when it does nothing but add flavor?
Nah, I'd be okay with skipping it.
Good, then it's settled. Enough talking, people. We have work to do.
That's better. Now, if you ask me if the story would be richer with this information from Shin, I would say yeah. But the implementation is laughably amateur and should have been integrated in a more meaningful and consequential fashion at a minimum. As it exists, this sort of info belongs in a guidebook. But that's essentially one of the biggest issues with this arc. exposition, lore, and narrative pivots sometimes feel improvised or haphazardly implemented like roadblocks. For instance, Neva's introduction to the hero team is wonderful. The placement of the encounter is fitting and rich with history for both Namekians present. However, due to the circumstances of the encounter, begging questions like why Neva didn't just stop the tyranny of the Demon Kings himself, or why Piccolo can't remember how to speak Namekian for some reason, while these aren't super important questions for me to have answers to, the answers themselves that abound feel more like hand waves of dismissal than thoughtful inclusions to further the story. I did, however, really like that Neva called Piccolo's name strange. That was great. Thankfully, taking the narrative expedient route, Dragon Ball Daima sees fit to inject some much-needed tension and energy by challenging both remaining Tamagami Guardians simultaneously, Do versus Tamagami 1 and Vegeta versus Tamagami number 2. Unfortunately, only one of these battles ended up hitting the mark for me, and it wasn't the one everyone, including myself, was waiting for, with the effortlessly cool and flashy transformation. The initial perceived failure and dismissal of Majin Ku is one of the most impressive story-driven swerves Dragon Ball Daima executes upon. Teased as the first serious threat one moment and then reduced to a comedic footnote the next, the narrative intention behind this swerve is to encourage both Arinsu and us at home to underestimate and disregard Majin Ku. And oh boy, did the internet do that! But little did they know that not only was Majin Ku the damn man, but with the birth of his little brother Do too, the single best double act of Daima had entered the picture, with Do's fight acting as the stage upon which Ku's true value was revealed to the world. Stronger than his brother and fighting with delightful chaos reminiscent of Fat Boo, only somehow more fun to watch, Do is the embodiment of unrestrained power without strategic thought. Seriously, watching this dude learn how to fight after effectively being born just a few minutes prior, while employing some of the most inventive Boo-style combat that would put Majin Buu himself to shame, made this a joy to watch. Which is fun on its own, but whoever thought to have Do run out of energy mid-fight, thus flipping the tables dramatically, was a genius. It's a choice perfectly befitting his chaotic nature and one totally antithetical to the stoic and composed Tamagami he's facing, transitioning Do from one-sided aggressor to a lethargic, desperate sleepy boy, setting the table perfectly for Majin Ku to step in.
Here, Do! Chocolate!
The integration of Ku, both through the clever chocolate assist and the mathematical challenge at the end, speaks to more than just his utility. It underscores Daima's recurring theme of overlooked potential, signaling that hope and true success often lurk in the most unlikely of individuals and places, waiting for their moment of recognition. And no other character was more overlooked than Majin Ku was. By contrast, Vegeta vs. Tamagami 2 started promisingly, yet quickly deteriorated into one of the series' most disappointing battles for me. Much the same way Goku's carefully strategized encounter with Tamagami 3 communicated his character through action in its opening minutes, Vegeta's initial approach was very promising. Aggressively straightforward, he initiates the fight with a bold, direct ki blast to the face of Tamagami number 2. However, fittingly, such an attack-focused strategy can prove limiting. Live by the sword, risk getting cut. This was honestly great. The animation was on point, the direction of Vegeta's combat spoke to his character, and it resulted in him being opened up to actual damage the likes of which Goku never received. This was sufficiently different and emblematic of his character's journey. Then the big fish came. Now, rather than adding intrigue or intensity, it feels entirely unnecessary, serving only to create an artificial sense of jeopardy. The fake-out ending with Vegeta briefly appearing defeated by the Kraken is as unconvincing as Master Roshi's forced kid voice in the English dub.
Can't recognize your own teacher?
Now, while Goku's battle against Tamagami 3 felt purposeful and thematically resonant, Vegeta's feels oddly empty? The issue is compounded further when Neva intervenes, powering up Tamagami 2 artificially. Now, while this decision initially carries potential symbolic value, showcasing how deeply Goku and Vegeta's fighting spirit might have influenced Neva, already it is overshadowed by the far more engaging Majin Brothers fight, and Neva's involvement only inadvertently amplifies the emptiness of Vegeta's struggle in this regard even further. Each previous Tamagami encounter complemented the protagonist's style perfectly. Tamagami 3's overwhelming attacks offered Goku the ideal opportunities for tactical counterstrikes. Tamagami 1's composed and methodical nature provided a perfect foil for Majin Buu's chaotic improvisation. However, Tamagami 2 disappointingly lacks distinct characterization or any complementary style to speak of. Instead of challenging Vegeta's aggressive, ego-driven approach with clever counters or evasive techniques to frustrate him, Tamagami 2 simply matches force with force, bolstered artificially by Neva, creating an unimaginative stalemate void of meaning. Now, some of you at this point might believe that Vegeta's fight, because it was forced to share a single episode's runtime, hopping back and forth with Doo's clash, it was ultimately doomed for failure from the beginning. I mean, Goku did get episode 8, praise be its name, to himself after all. However, while that might seem reasonable, it is in fact cope. The real reason this contest between Doo and Vegeta might appear to be hurting one side more than the other has nothing to do with time sharing and everything to do with good old-fashioned narrative incompetence on behalf of whomever wrote this. And for reasons I'm about to get into, I don't think it was Akira Toriyama. In short, jumping back and forth between scenes is not a detriment. In fact, if executed correctly, both scenes can enjoy a heightened sense of drama far beyond that which would be possible individually. And an example from the original Dragon Ball is easy to find: Trunks versus Perfect Cell. With Vegeta unconscious and Goku training his son in the time chamber, Trunks is the only one around to stand up to Cell. The situation seems dire, that is until Trunks unleashes the full extent of his hidden strength. For the first time in the series, we witness Super Saiyan Grade 3, and it is awesome. It even looks like it's working. Then Toriyama cuts to this scene.
That's awesome, Dad! You really did it! You went beyond Super Saiyan!
Thanks to this insight, in an instant, the audience's excitement for what Trunks has achieved is replaced with a profound sense of dread-filled, dramatic irony. It changes the texture of the scene and, most importantly, how the audience engages with it. Now they know something Trunks doesn't, that this flashy new form has one fatal flaw.
You can't hit me.
Individually, these scenes from the Cell arc aren't anything to write home about, but when arranged together in this way, they form one of the most memorable moments from the arc itself. That's the power of this narrative structure. But in Daima, nothing either fight does informs or recontextualizes the other. They simply get in each other's way. Kind of. Even if we were to remove Majin Buu's fight as a point of obvious comparison and isolate Vegeta's scenes to be judged alone, its issues and lack of substance only become more apparent. Of all the Demon World Guardians, Tamagami 2 has the most vapid and ill-suited personality for Vegeta to bounce off of, which, given how Vegeta is known for his ability to mouth off in battle, takes away one of the character's most entertaining qualities. What are fights like Vegeta versus Android 19, Android 18, Semi-Perfect Cell, Kaba, Hit, or even his clashes with Goku if you remove his ability to mouth off? I'll tell you what they are: fucking boring! With Tamagami 2, Vegeta is distractingly mute, offering neither memorable dialogue nor intriguing physical performances. Well, I mean, that is until, of course, the visually stunning yet narratively hollow Super Saiyan 3 transformation. And while I think it is one of the coolest forms attained in the franchise from a design perspective, much like painting a house with shaky foundations won't increase its value, a visually stunning transformation cannot redeem a fundamentally flawed fight, forcing me to feel not only underwhelmed, but in fact cheated out of a moment that could have been genuinely memorable and meaningful. And I'm not looking for some emotionally profound build-up like Goku got on Namek or Gohan received at the close of the Cell arc. After all, Goku's unveiling of Super Saiyan 3 came out of thin air, which was part of its appeal. However, the issue I have with Vegeta's transformation isn't that it came out of nowhere, it's that it was unveiled within a scene utterly void of tension. Vegeta's Super Saiyan 3 form has been long anticipated, and for it to arrive here, looking as stunning as it does, devoid of any meaningful occasion, it feels like a profoundly wasted opportunity that, unfortunately, can never happen again. Even Vegeta's final mental challenge, while comedic, somehow feels shallow too. Where Ku and Goku's successes in their respective mental challenges offered symbolic value within the themes of unexpected greatness, Vegeta's again is just sort of there. And the worst part is that it could have been infinitely improved upon by emphasizing Vegeta's defining trait: his pride. Imagine instead that Vegeta, certain of his answer, dismisses Piccolo's cautious advice and impulsively answers incorrectly. Not only would that shake up the streak of never encountering anything they couldn't overcome, it would also contrast Ku and Doo's brotherly approach nicely. Ordinarily, this would spell instant defeat, but in light of his earlier interference raising the power of the Tamagami himself, Neva offers Vegeta an unprecedented second chance at the mental game. Only this time around, Vegeta still doesn't know, and what's more is, neither does Piccolo. But it's here Bulma could provide an emotional turning point. Rather than handing Vegeta the answer outright, she could offer subtle encouragement through their shared personal history, utilizing a private code or intimate detail known only to them, ripe for comedic exploitation and in line with their other couple-centric gags in the show. This approach would deeply enrich the scene, offering emotional depth, reaffirming Vegeta's internal struggle with pride, highlighting Bulma's pivotal role in his life, life and avoiding redundant, vapid storytelling. And I wish my reign of negativity ended here, but unfortunately for Dragon Ball Daima, it's only the beginning.
I think its friends are here!
Under different, perhaps more favorable circumstances, Dragon Ball Daima's 13th episode might have succeeded as a charming, whimsical adventure rich with creativity and a genuine sense of exploration. Indeed, it showcased everything many initially hoped the series would consistently deliver. However, the episode is critically undermined by two fundamental flaws. Firstly, the pacing and narrative tension in Daima had already been notably, well, I was going to say inconsistent, but absent feels more accurate at this point, culminating in a problematic Vegeta fight with scattered and sometimes abandoned plot points. Episode 13, positioned precariously close to the series' climax, was expected to thoughtfully advance the plot. Instead, it features perhaps the single most egregious and inconsequential delay of the series, a mechanical breakdown that, despite its visual and creative charm, provided no meaningful progression in the storyline. Secondly, the episode is an island within the series, meaning it could be entirely removed without affecting the narrative continuity or the overarching plot. Effective episodic storytelling, exemplified by series like Avatar: The Last Airbender, uses standalone adventures, but the events within those episodic adventures are usually either tied directly to the influence of the Fire Lord himself or serve to build crucial character development needed for the ultimate goal. And a lot of the time, it's both. Episode 13 of Dragon Ball Daima failed to do this, presenting a pleasant yet ultimately pointless diversion that neither enriched character arcs nor contributed to the climactic build-up necessary at this crucial juncture in the story. And once again, it gets even worse in the next episode. While episode 13 felt frustratingly irrelevant to the series' central narrative goals, episode 14 manages to actively hurt the story even more than the prior did. While episode 13 felt tacked on, this is the episode our heroes finally break through into the first demon realm, the penultimate goal of the series. Next up, save Dende, right? You'd think this would be a stunning and exciting way to kick off the episode, and you'd be right. Too bad it's saved for the final couple of minutes of the episode instead. The rest is plagued from the same issues episode 10 experienced. Paralyzed by narrative bloat, introductions of characters that should have been introduced at the beginning of the series, and exposition that stops the already sluggish sense of forward progression in its tracks yet again. The result is a breakthrough into the first demon realm that feels like an escape from the second act, rather than an explosion into the climax. Which brings us, my friends, to the third and final act of this story. The climax, the main event, the moment you've all been waiting for, and it's kinda shit. Now don't get me wrong, it eventually picks up and provides some awesome eye candy that I'll fangirl about shortly, but even then, the final big bad battle feels notably lacking.
Hit them with everything we've got!
Shrieking with all the composure of a toddler craving a Peppa Pig marathon, Goma is still treated as a joke, even at this crucial juncture. To borrow again from Avatar: The Last Airbender, Fire Lord Ozai is the series' ultimate villain and primary target, yet he doesn't appear in the inciting incident in Act 1, nor clearly until much later in Act 2. Similarly, Goma's initial motivations and setup didn't concern me because I expected Goku and friends would eventually confront the suffering he inflicted on the demon world, thus deepening their emotional investment. Just as Aang's story gains depth when encountering the horrors committed by the Fire Nation, genocides, cults, and enslavements, I didn't need Goma to become that extreme. However, some meaningful connection to individuals personally impacted would have greatly strengthened Daima's narrative. Yet, Daima only offers superficial hints. Collars, life-draining oppression, hopelessness without genuine emotional depth. Thus, Goku's motivation remains simplistic. Retrieve Dende and the Dragon Balls despite his inconsistent urgency regarding even these tasks. This lack of emotional groundwork highlights Dragon Ball Daima's most significant failing, in my opinion, its second act. It feels like a rough first draft script, lightly touched up by Akira Toriyama but lacking substantial improvements. Without robust setup, no climax, however grand, can rescue it. And this is painfully evident as Daima awkwardly stumbles towards its finale. The second act did, however, successfully establish a potentially compelling group dynamic. Alongside combat-ready veterans like Goku, Vegeta, and Piccolo, we also have vulnerable individuals like Pansy, Hybis, and Bulma, who they themselves are there only because of the limitations placed on the stronger allies. A perfect scenario for dramatic tension. Unfortunately, instead of emphasizing the genuine threat to these vulnerable characters, the narrative wastes time showing Goku and Vegeta getting ineffectively shot by ray guns only for them to easily charge the castle anyway. Why even establish a threat if it's immediately disregarded? When King Kadad eventually shows up, conveniently timed as Goma deploys stronger forces, the timing makes little sense. Narratively, it would have been more logical and I think dramatically impactful for Kadan to intervene earlier, safeguarding his daughter and the others, thus enabling Goku and the stronger fighters to press forward unimpeded. This narrative execution honestly is baffling. Toriyama and the writing team clearly intended to convey overwhelming danger and high stakes, but instead delivered confusion? Why would Goku, who effortlessly defeated the powerful Tamagami from Demon World 3, struggle against a mere military unit without even resorting to Super Saiyan? We've seen Goku tackle this very scenario in the Red Ribbon Army arc, and it didn't end well for that army either. Ultimately, Episode 15's narrative and structural flaws are even more severe than those of its predecessors.
We saved Dende first.
Piccolo is right. Dende should be our top priority.
What? Is Dende suddenly more endangered? What makes retrieving him immediately a priority now, especially considering your prior indifference? It's, again, bafflingly inconsistent. On second viewing, episode 16 reveals itself as an absolute mess. Why is Goku searching the castle on foot? At this stage, shouldn't he have reacquired instant transmission? Or is Super Saiyan 3 somehow easier than that? The methodical foot search feels unnecessarily tedious and illogical. When we finally confront Degasu, the scene falls completely flat. His sycophantic persona could have been an effective misdirection, setting up a twist revealing deeper plans or alignment with Arinsu's cunning, but no! He's just an idiot attempting to escape in a flying machine from a group notorious for their habit of destroying aircraft. They can't even keep their own plane airborne. Why does he think he'd fare better here? This depiction sharply contrasts Shin's earlier implications that Degasu was comparable in capability to Arinsu. Instead, Degasu comes across as utterly buffoonish, incompetent, undermining narrative expectations and character consistency. Surprisingly, I have no issue with how the Tertian Oculus was introduced into this plot. The presence aligns thematically with the narrative idea of extraordinary elements hiding in plain sight, a concept neatly embodied in the amusing Hypus exchange. However, my significant criticism lies in how the narrative attempts to use the Tertian Oculus on Goma. It feels like a desperate attempt to retroactively inject menace and intrigue into a villain who is otherwise painfully uninteresting and non-threatening due to the lack of attention and development during the 16 episodes building to this point. It feels desperate and lazy. Increasing muscle mass doesn't inherently make your character more compelling. It didn't work for Vegeta's earlier battle, it didn't work for SpongeBob, and it's not working right now for Goma. Or maybe it is. As I've mentioned countless times already during this review's latter stages, Goma is a character dramatically lacking the gravitas of a villain worthy of the final climax spot. If I were to critique each act of the story as if it was written by 3 different teams, I would say that Act 2 failed spectacularly, while Act 3, in my opinion, managed to achieve a level of success with Goma that impressed me greatly somehow. All through the delivery of a single genius line of dialogue from Son Goku. You see, during his life, Akira Toriyama has answered countless interviewer questions pertaining to his process, the worlds he's created, and the countless characters he's populated them with. However, to this day, there are 2 quotes I often think back on as they reframed how I understood and viewed the decisions made in this series. The first is a comment made concerning his relationship with dialogue, explaining that he tries not to write dialogue unless it strengthens characterization. This is why Goku didn't need to speak during the Tamagami 3 fight to say everything we needed to understand, and why Vegeta's jaunts and jeers in the face of lesser opponents always enhanced that moment for him. Both approaches serve as effective means of communicating character. Now, this doesn't mean that any fight can be silent or anyone can adopt a verbose approach like Vegeta does in battle. Both creative choices need to be informed thoughtfully. The difference between Goku and Vegeta's largely silent Tamagami battles is that one says everything while the other is just quiet. Vegeta's bravado in the face of Kaba in Super, as well as Android 19 in the Android arc of Z, serves to act as a window into who that character is at different points in time, elegantly and efficiently. The second comment I often think back on concerns Goku, where Toriyama said, Son Goku from Dragon Ball doesn't fight for the sake of others, but because he wants to fight against strong guys. I've always been dissatisfied with the righteous hero-type portrayal others gave him. Throughout the fights within Dragon Ball Daima, Goku and his friends, okay, well, maybe just Vegeta, have jousted childishly over who gets to fight whom next. It's a charming classic Toriyama dynamic often employed both as a comedic backdrop and as indirect characterization for their opponent to bounce off of or comment on. We've seen it countless times in this series, and yet following a brief exchange with this newly empowered Demon King, that genius line I alluded to earlier stood to flip that dynamic on its head. And through doing so, a sentence we almost never hear him utter escaped Goku's mouth.
I think we're all gonna need to rush him at once.
When my little Goku-loving ears heard those words leave his face hole, I actually got chills. For a character like Goku, always on the lookout not only for stronger opponents, but specifically opponents stronger than he, despite being virtually silent during his battle with Tamagami 3, here Toriyama deemed it necessary for Goku to not only speak, but do so with an intensely serious leadership quality, orchestrating a gang offensive against one enemy. By doing this, it makes Goma the great equalizer, focusing the attention of all other plot threads onto him while simultaneously leveraging the strength of Goku's inherent character. In spite of Act 2's failings, this line manages to focus the story perfectly, while placing a modicum of respect on Goma's presence. Furthermore, the fight itself excels through the implementation of inventive and novel choreographed action sequences, structured around teamwork specifically. Moments like Majin Buu restraining Goma with the others coordinating a joint offensive effectively illustrated how each character's unique abilities contribute meaningfully to the fight. One of my favorite moments of character-inspired action stems from Ku encouraging his brother to transform like Goku. It is such a fun idea, leaning into the magical Majin absurdity component of his character in a way we've never seen applied. And yet, despite all of this novelty and earned strength, one by one, they all fall. Even Goku. This might rub some folks the wrong way, but while I believe Dragon Ball GT's Super Saiyan 4 looked visually inspired, I genuinely believe Dragon Ball Daima's approach is an improvement on the design in almost every area. With slight alterations to the color scheme and proportional exaggeration of his forearms and hands, the forms never looked so good to me. And that's as a kid. It gets even wilder when he gets into an adult. Okay, we're going to save that for later. However, when it comes to the addition of further transformations in this series, as you all know, my mind goes to one place first. It's never how cool it looks, it's how it serves the story. Does it feel earned? Does it feel in line with the themes of this tale, or does it get in the way of it, acting entirely superficially? Super Saiyan 1 was the realization of a legend built up for a long time. Super Saiyan 2 was the culmination of an even longer character arc spanning Gohan's entire life. And Super Saiyan 3 was a narrative surprise brought about when the story was at its most tense, with Goku needing to buy time with the seconds he had left remaining on Earth. But Neva gave this ability to Goku, right? Despite saying his powers weren't for worldly conflicts such as these, is that an issue? No, because he never gave Goku anything he didn't already possess. At the beginning of this story, I explained that upon first viewing, I was ecstatic that Goku's journey seemed to be set up to revolve around reattaining the powers he earned over the years. However, as the journey pressed onward and we reached Tamagami number 3, something else became glaringly apparent. While reacquiring his lost abilities was certainly part of the journey, the central purpose of Goku in this story is to inject hope back into a hopeless world. Neva might have unlocked this power for Goku much the same way Guru did for Gohan, but that's not the part worth analyzing in my opinion. What's worth looking at was his decision to act in the first place. Explicitly stated in this story, Neva outlines why he remains a pacifist in light of the tyranny of the demon realm. Yet here he is, after witnessing the unstoppable disaster Goma has become and the light Goku embodies. Neva acts, gifting Goku not power, but the ability to access the power that's been within him all along. For no other reason than because Goku has proven himself worthy. It's a quality that speaks to Goku's impact on the story, certainly, informing every element of it. From his past fights, conversations, and even the villain of this series who has attained power not because it was always within him, and certainly not because he earned it, but instead because he coerced it from someone else. Most importantly, the sentiment that Goku embodies is felt by one individual more so than any other at this time: Glorio, spurring him to act entirely out of character. It's a blink and you miss it moment, but the important ones always are. In the same way Goku's presence highlights that greatness and hope can be found in the most unlikely of places, sometimes it's not the power of an individual's strength that bends fate, or the cataclysmic action that follows. Sometimes it only takes a moment. A small, understated moment of realization that ultimately determines the outcome of the entire world. And this moment, this split-second visual exchange between Goku and Glorio, is what wins Goku the day in the end, proving that power, just like change, can arise from the most unlikely of places and take shape in ways never thought possible. The duality of Glorio and Goku's strength of character informing the conclusion of this story in this way is nothing short of brilliant. Almost as brilliant as the next set piece, a set piece that just so happens to be one of the best Kamehamehas the franchise has ever seen. At this point, it's difficult to surprise me with a Kamehameha. I've seen it all, fired as a last resort, fired with feet, fired and controlled remotely, fired and timed attacked underwater. I've seen it used in conjunction with instant transmission, and most recently, I was thoroughly blown away by its inventive usage during the Tournament of Power against Kefla. Over the years, I've learned that the secret to a great Kamehameha, it seems, is creative surprise. And man, did this one surprise me. Never count Goku out. The blast catches fire! How awesome is that? Okay. However, recovering in an instant and effortlessly stripping Goku of his power, Goma embodies the true meaning of unearned potential through magic. And while very unsatisfying, it does complement Goku's earned power in certain interesting aspects. However, as I mentioned earlier, Goma's fate in this regard had already been sealed, thanks to the will of our handsome little Smurf boy, Glorio. Oh my god, it's happening! It's finally happening! Don't panic! I said don't fucking panic! Emboldened by their restored bodies and replenished power, Goku and Vegeta eagerly return to their familiar routine of taking turns battling the main antagonist. However, almost as if reinforcing the thematic core that I've touched upon throughout this review, their journey has never solely been about regaining their lost power, and predictably, such an individualistic approach immediately proves insufficient. On a meta level, episode 19 is clearly structured as a reward to fans who've patiently waited for this very moment. Our favorite heroes fully restored, finally unleashing their newly unveiled forms in all of their mature splendor. It just looks so pretty. Observing Vegeta's intense battle against Goma, Goku swiftly recognizes an uncomfortable reality. Even at their newly restored peak, brute strength alone is no longer enough, a striking difference from their experience against foes like Majin Buu. The Dragon Balls may have just replenished their power, but when facing an opponent who seems immortal, endlessly regenerating stamina turns even overwhelming strength into an exercise in futility.
Ugh. You're never going to keep me down, no matter how many times you hit me.
Aside from the breathtaking visual flair during Vegeta's explosive combat sequence, what captivated me most was the insightful sideline commentary provided by Goku and Piccolo. Piccolo's role here as a tactical advisor perfectly complements Goku's mature, strategic mindset. Their analysis clearly delineates the challenge posed by Goma, an immortal puzzle that mere force alone cannot solve. The entire sequence just drips with authentic characterization. Goku's newfound maturity, Piccolo's astute observations, and Vegeta's familiar bravado, it all sets up the single greatest comedic moment Dragon Ball has ever delivered. And capping this all off is a glorious homage to one of the most iconic sequences from the franchise. Echoing the famous battle against Majin Buu, Goku once again steps forward to buy crucial time for Piccolo to maneuver into position. But this time, and I truly mean it, this moment is elevated to an unparalleled visual height. Yuya Takahashi, the GOAT, the man, Kami himself, his artwork is nothing short of astonishing here. Each transformation into successive Super Saiyan forms surpasses the previous one, crescendoing with the legendary declaration, one more bonus, or to go even further beyond, as it masterfully sets the stage for an adult Super Saiyan 4. And oh my god, just look at it, it's absolutely stunning. Look at his magnificent weird monkey arms, it is perfect. And yet, even though Goku now stands at the pinnacle of his powers, Goma remains utterly unrelenting. Thankfully, the true plan doesn't hinge solely on raw strength, as I alluded to, but rather on the collective efforts of several key players. Goku's inspiring actions, Neva's awakened power, Glorio's heartfelt wish, Vegeta's willingness to step aside, however reluctant, Piccolo's cunning strategy, Arinsu's cooperation, and Ku's crucial discovery about the Tertian Oculus. Together, their combined determination sets the stage, not just for the ultimate attack or the ultimate distraction, but for an expression of their shared resolve to stop Goma, bring peace to the demon realm, and symbolically reconnect the lives long separated, divided, and subjugated for over a millennium. This is the single greatest Kamehameha ever. What a breathtaking visual spectacle. A blast that doesn't just pierce Goma, it transcends the physical battle itself, bridging the dividing layers between worlds. All Piccolo has to do now is strike his head 3 times. 1, 2. My heart filled with joy upon realizing that Ku was the true hero of this tale to deal the final blow. His elevation to the new Demon King feels not only thoroughly earned, but beautifully reinforces the central theme of Dragon Ball Daima. Of course, the character everyone underestimated proved essential in delivering the decisive blows. It's a wonderful full-circle moment for Majin Ku, one that left me deeply satisfied by the journey's end, even if his choices of minister were, well, let's just say a little questionable. While I genuinely enjoyed myself by the end of the story, it was undeniably in spite of the disaster that many of these episodes leading up to it ultimately became. In fact, I'd argue that much of the series' second half was underwhelming, with numerous aspects of its first leaving a lot to be desired. Overall, Dragon Ball Daima often felt like a first draft. Buckets and buckets of potential, but scattered throughout were disparate, unresolved plot threads, either abandoned entirely or perplexingly left unaddressed. I mean, why introduce a compelling premise like the Demon World colors if you're not going to utilize them meaningfully? Oh, also, especially troubling is the treatment of Arinsu, whose creation of these oppressive colors is inexplicably swept under the rug, leaving viewers with an unsatisfying, "you're not all that bad" impression, you know? It just doesn't make sense. Furthermore, why consistently waste valuable runtime on sequences that barely impact the narrative, if at all? Why bloat an already sluggish pace with relentless lore dumps, even if some were genuinely fascinating? And most importantly, and I've been so good not to mention this yet in the entire review, but I'm taking the time right now, why on earth did you introduce so many Medibugs if you were only going to use 1 or 2? They were just glorified sensu beans. What about the join bug? What happened there? Why even set it up if it's ultimately meaningless? It's like someone playing volleyball on their own. It's genuinely infuriating and baffling, though perhaps somewhat explainable given the show's behind-the-scenes production chaos. And no, I'm not talking about animation. That was Super's thing. Daima rocked that department. What I'm talking about is that Dragon Ball Daima began production before its script was even completed, effectively locking the creators into their initial decisions and severely restricting the potential for later adjustments or drafts. This production constraint likely explains much of the narrative incoherence and chaos, its unresolved threads, and overall sense of disjointedness. This is precisely why this series is so profoundly frustrating, because with just a handful of thoughtful alterations, it could have been incredible. However, as the series drew to its close and Goku set off alongside his friends back to Earth, while I felt as a whole the story was deeply troubled, as made evident through my coverage of this tale, there were undeniable pockets of brilliance, rich with Toriyama's spirit dotted across this tale, helping tremendously to quell any sense of frustration I might have felt. And then, something came I didn't expect. A final surprise scene. One that feels from start to finish entirely his. It was perfect. A heartfelt tribute that brought these beloved characters to life in ways I'd never experienced before, and I'm not gonna lie, it brought a tear to my eye. One of the earliest lessons Goku learned was that no matter how strong you become, there's always someone stronger out there. In a poignant reflection of the very circumstances surrounding Daima's creation and release, Akira Toriyama's parting message and theme within this world that he offered was a touching variation of that early lesson. It reminds us profoundly that the greatness we seek in times of uncertainty can indeed come from the most unlikely of places. Whether it be a small boy with a tail living atop a mountain, a mysterious and powerful item hidden in an alien shop somewhere, or an unassuming young man who simply loved to draw, quietly dreaming away in the Japanese countryside. You never truly know when, where, or how the next generation defining talent will emerge, ready to inspire and change the world forever. Rest in peace, and thank you, Akira Toriyama.